Welcome back to another reading and correcting with me, Kindar the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. These are where I read a chapter of one of my stories and correct it as I go. If you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. on Twitch. 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. If you want to support me, that's on my Patreon. Today, we are doing chapter 4 of Fractured Families. The discussion had gone better than he'd expected. Everyone he'd planned to involve in the mission, Victor had been the one true gamble. Yes, Alex knew the man was physically fit. He'd looked at the work he'd had done, and considering his finances, Victor had chosen wisely. But had that been in preparation for changing career, or because he was getting ready for a hunt of his own? He was also the one person whom he couldn't count on their previous interaction to get him to agree or hire him. The two of them had not been friends. Victor probably saw him as a rival for Tristan's affection. The man was still deluded that there was something real under that fur, but that interest had made him say yes, which was good, because as a lawman, if Alex ever even mentioned paying for his help, Victor would have said no outright, out of principle. And Alex needed someone who could act like a lawman. Alex could create the identity, but he wasn't Tristan. He couldn't act the part. Victor wouldn't have to act. So Victor made two, including Jacoby. And using the information Victor had obtained for him, he sent a message to number 3, Miranda Sunstar. Not only was she on the record for capturing Tristan once, but she'd taken him to the Sayatoga prison ship. She knew how they operated. Only, while she hadn't exactly vanished from the universe over the last few years, her visibility had fallen down. She'd had some sort of falling out with the major mercenary boards. He hadn't been able to get the details, but by the looks of things, she talked to the law and had gotten a lot of mercs in trouble. Money would be how he got her to work for him, but the same could convince her to betray him. So he'd have to have his own brand of safeties. It wouldn't take much to get her in. After all these years without missions from the boards, she had to be low on fund, even if she'd gotten some private work and was as frugal as he and Tristan's were. He'd never understood the mindset most mercs had to party it up after each mission. He got enough excitement out of the missions. Neither he nor Tristan needed to go party afterward. This way, they'd eventually accumulated enough money to buy a continent to retire to. Well, he could buy a continent. Tristan could buy a good-sized planet and have enough left over for a long, uneventful life, if that was something a man like him could even want. But even if Tristan did retire, it wouldn't be here. It would be to a different base. Alex figured he had 6 or 7 already set up for such a situation. He could confirm the number, but could find out how many there were if he wanted to, but it wasn't his place to know that. If things were bad enough, if Tristan couldn't tell him what he needed, then he'd go find the next safe place that someone had set up. Otherwise, Alex would wait to be told. He hadn't been able to locate the Sayatoga on the net. It was running dark at the moment, but someone hadn't thought to tell the manufacturers to erase the corporation's purchase history, and with it, their shuttle tags. One of the tags the Saratoga bought showed up on this one system over where Jacoby's projected trail led, and it had been picked up by the system there, as well as other ships as their avoidance system registered it. If they'd been any smart, they would have swapped the tags, but like any overconfident criminals, they thought they'd gotten away clean. Using those contacts, he'd been able to rebuild their most probable trajectory and confirm they'd been here. Using the same method, over the weeks he was stuck waiting, he'd built a probable trajectory to where they were going, the trajectory along which the Saratoga could meet with them. The advantage of a prison ship was that it could move. While it was running dark now, it would have to open up to the net eventually, and when it did, his programs would be there. A crash broke his thoughts, and he was up, knife in hand, before he realized it. A woman in her early 20s was on her knees putting tools back in a box. The others, repairing the cryo chairs, threw a few verbal jab at her, and she replied before getting back to work. He sat down and rubbed his leg. How's the leg? Jacoby asked, standing in the doorway. Aches. You have no idea how lucky you are she didn't just tie you down until she was certain everything was in working order. I thought she'd use gravitic generator. The casing had been gone for a week now, but he still felt like there was something off with his leg. You are way past the generators. She uses that on patients she likes. You ran off on her. That means ropes. I had work to do and she knows it. That's why I'm still here and not tied up in her clinic. Jacoby chuckled. Shows what you know. Trust me, she wouldn't have taken me back there. You really don't know her at all, do you? He eyed Jacoby. It wasn't what he meant, and if the ex-merc wasn't so stubbornly set on his "we're all friend here" thing, he'd have realized it. Of course, Cornelius knew better. When she'd barge onto the ship, demanded Alex go back to the clinic, he'd explain to her what he'd do if she laid a hand on him, what he'd do to anyone who tried to keep him from finishing his work. She'd shown up to remove the casing, told him to rest, and hadn't returned since. About the chairs, Jacoby said, do you really need all of them fixed? How many people are you intending to bring? None of them. If that's what you're worried about, he replied, turning back to the terminal. No response from Miranda yet. I'm not. I've explained things, and I'm wondering why you're getting them to fix all of them. Because he keeps them out of my hair, Alex snapped, wishing Jacoby would get the message. Do you have any idea how many of them have said they want to come with me to rescue him? Kids that weren't even born when we left talk about him like he's some sort of hero. What kind of bullshit story are you feeding them? We just tell them about who he was. They've all seen the empty house by the forest and they wonder. We want them to know who he is for when he comes back. So, yeah, they care about him. Alex snorted. Alex, don't bother. Unlike you, I know him, the real him. He'd have no problem burning this old place to the ground if it was the convenient things to do. Alex, you don't. I do. He pointed to the people working on the other part of the ship and lowered his voice. They want to believe we're off to rescue this nice, fluffy Somalian who's all smiles and helpful hands. Fine. But you need to understand it was an act. If you don't, it could get you killed before we're done. Jacoby threw his hand up. Fine, I'm dropping this. He nodded to the work. Still doesn't explain why you need all of them. There's 26 chairs. I told you, I'm just keeping them busy. I have a dozen. We have a dozen, so we're ready to go before they're done. The work, if we're ready to go before they're done, the work will stop before. If we have a dozen, so if we're ready to go before the work is done, before they're done, the work will stop. Of course, he'd planned on things taking long enough they'd all be repaired. There was one variable he couldn't account for, and that would affect how many people would be on the ship. But it was a bad idea to be on a ship with not enough cryo. Horror vids had been built around that concept. Who do you have? Alex brought up Victor's image. It was recent, so at least he looked like he would be an asset. He looks green, Jacoby stated. He is. He was law. You're bringing a lawman on an attack ship on an attack on a prison ship? He knows what we're doing. He's okay with it. He's okay with it, or he's a plant. He has a vested interest in us succeeding. Jacoby gave him a questioning look, but Alex didn't elaborate. He'd made sure to carefully explain to Victor what would happen and what he expected they'd have to do. He'd given the lawman every out he could think of, but he did need Victor, but he hadn't wanted him to be able to come back and claim he'd been manipulated. Of course, he didn't think Victor had paid attention. Alex had told him Tristan had been kidnapped and nothing else mattered. Miranda was next. It wasn't recent, but she couldn't have changed that much. If she had, it would be to look tougher. Miranda Sunstar. She's our way onto the Saratoga. She has a history with the ship. Merc. Can you trust her? I can pay her. Is she any good? She looks like she's after my time. Alex wondered if there were any mercs alive today that qualified as before Jacoby's time. She's good enough to have captured Tristan once. Who else? I have a locksmith in mind, and he comes with his own crew, so that could take care of that. That should take care of Muscle. I thought you'd be I thought you'd be the locksmith. You're good with computers. He's better with locks than I am, and I'm the bait. All right, who do you have in mind as a medic? Alex just looked at him. That was one position he hadn't considered. He and Tristan had always been able to handle each other's injuries on their own, or with a medical bed at worst. Most of the time, painkillers and heals were all they needed. Cornelius isn't coming. I don't trust her. Jacoby laughed. She hasn't offered. She's seen what the life does to people, and she wants nothing to do with it. Jacoby kept hinting there was more to the doctor than Alex saw, that most of the people here were the same, and he wondered what she might have seen through that. What she might have seen, what she might have been through. That had made her take refuge on a planet like this. He could see if the one doctor he knew well enough to trust was willing to come when he called the gully, but even if she was willing, would Captain Miron agree? Asking for a handful of grunts was one thing. If not her, he'd have to check the boards for someone with proper training, but that would take two people driven by money, and that would be a complete unknown. There was no way he could find every vault in the time he had left. But what if there was someone else? She wasn't fully trained, but she demonstrated she could manage it. Finding her would be difficult. He had no idea where she would have gone after delivering Baran, but it wasn't like her skill set lent itself to hiding someone. There would be a trail for him to follow. I have someone in mind, he said, as he began coding a program. And this concludes Chapter 4 of Fractured Families. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to know when the next chapter is going to be up, subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to read the story as well as the others in the series, they are available on all major e-retailer. If you're looking for another way to support me, that's my Patreon, where you can also get access to just about everything I've written. And if you want to listen to these live every Tuesday morning, if you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. The links are in the notes. And with that, I shall wish you a good day.